Okay. Welcome everybody. Happy Friday to you all, wherever you are. We are going to launch into this fun afternoon session. Before we start the slideshow, a lot of you folks are from the University of California. Some of you aren't, but many of you are, and many of you are from UCANR, and so you know this. But it's always nice to repeat and understand where we come from. So this group that's presenting this workshop to you today, the Informatics and GIS program, I'm going to introduce you to everybody in the next slide, but we're part of a mighty network of people across California who serve Californians and try to connect UC research to improve the lives of Californians across the state, and in natural resources, in agriculture, in nutrition, and youth development. It's a great entity, and one of the things that UCANR has are a bunch of statewide programs. You might have heard of some of them, 4-H or Master Gardener. Some of you are from some of these wonderful programs. And our program, Informatics and GIS, as our mission, we want to help you integrate these kinds of tools you're going to be learning about today, cutting edge geospatial tools, mapping tools, into your work. And we do this through trainings like this. We also have a GIS service center if you need some help doing some of your work. We do conduct research. We do fly drones. And you can find out more information about what we do and how we can help serve you and your mission at our website there. So first of all, big welcome from all of us at IGIS to all of you. And for those of you who are outside UC or outside UCANR, you're absolutely welcome as well. And I'm excited to meet you all. This is who we are. You're going to hear from me first. I'm Maggie Kelly. I'm the director of the Informatics and GIS program. Sean Hogan, he's our lead drone scientist and remote sensing scientist. He is going to be teaching the workshop. And then in the background, we have a lot of our other crew who are here to help you. So Andy, Genoa, Priyanka, Robert, and Shane, they're in the background. If you have any trouble, just put out a chat. This isn't working, or what's going on, or, when I'm talking, I'm not really looking at chat. When Sean's talking, he's not really looking at chat, but somebody's going to be watching chat. So, and Genoa is there confirming that. So yeah, we're here to help you get the best out of this experience. So who you are, this is where I want to know a little bit more about you. And so most of you are from California. We have a couple of folks from abroad. I didn't put them on the map here just so you could see where all of you from California are. You're from across the state. A lot of you, as I said before, are affiliated in some way with UC or UCANR. But in order to get a better sense of you, if you might, put in the chat who you are, and if you can briefly say what you want to get out of this workshop. And then if you don't want to say that, that's fine. But give us a heads up on where you are with ArcGIS Online. Are you a beginner or are you an expert? So let's get that started. Who wants to be first? All right, Gaurav. Nice, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else brave enough? Yay, Camilla. Cool, welcome. Ooh, Scotland, welcome. My dad's Scottish. Shane, he's a 4, excellent. IPM projects, wonderful. Yeah, if you're a beginner, don't worry about it. If you want to put down I'm a 1, don't worry about it. It's all levels. Welcome. Sean being his honest self. I feel like that. Yay, Grav. That's exciting. He's interested in looking at impact of mines. I know that on freshwater. Bob, welcome. Samantha from NPI, Nutritional Policy Institute. Great. Okay. Samantha's here for a refresher. This is wonderful. Keep it rolling. I'm going to close chat just so I can focus on the slides, but keep that stuff going because I like to read it later. Okay, so that's who you are. This is what we're going to do today. I'm going to give you a little bit of a slideshow brief, a little bit of an intro to set the stage for what we're doing here. We're going to be doing some GIS on the web, which wasn't really an option a while ago. We're going to do a very speedy introduction. I'm going to try to set the stage for these various software that we're going to do and why we're choosing ArcGIS Online. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the considerations when you're doing data work in the cloud and some considerations. And then I'm going to break and we're going to go to Sean and he's going to get you started on the actual workshop itself. Sound good? Okay. So very quick. This is sort of, standard intro to GIS slide. GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, they're systems to acquire, manage, analyze, and disseminate spatial data. So the GIS is just a software package or set of tools to pull the complexity of the 3D plus time world, the four-dimensional world, into a computer so that you can do complex analysis and visualize your results. And all GIS are made possible because we can georeference data, which means we can pinpoint it on the surface of the Earth. We can register it in an X and Y coordinate system. It's made powerful because of interesting analyses you can do. What's next to me, what's surrounding me, what's upstream for me, what's downstream for me. And it's made beautiful through these visualization tools. So all of that is what GIS is. And it's important to remember that all of this data is just a representation of reality. We're picking and choosing what we're pulling into this computer system, but it's all registered in space. And a little bit about GIS here. From that, what a GIS is, let's talk about how we analyze or how we interact with a GIS software. From the origins of digital GIS in the 80s up until about 2012, we really were talking about desktop analysis. And in the Esri world, Esri is just the software company that's the most popular software, and that's what we'll be working on today. And most universities have site licenses for Esri software. Up until 2012, we were talking about desktop, and it was first ArcInfo, then ArcView, and then ArcMap. Some of you might have worked with these software packages. You had to pull data down, work on it locally. If you wanted to share it, you pushed it back up or put it on a thumb drive and handed it to somebody. In 2012, we had a radical break and we started developing web GIS, GIS in the cloud. And that's when ArcGIS Online was developed. And so now we have sort of this separation where you can do work in the cloud or you can do work on your desktop. You can go back and forth between them, and we'll talk about this. But today we're looking at this ArcGIS Online, this cloud-based processing software that allows for really rich data analysis, really rich visualization, all in a browser. It's fantastic. So before 2012, before ArcGIS Online, GIS was really the realm of GIS professionals. It was very specialized software. It was on desktop computers. Sharing data was super cumbersome. But after this release date in 2012, it's opened up accessibility to spatial analysis. We can now talk about web maps, web applications, big analysis capabilities. GIS can be used by anybody. It's accessed by any browser. So that's absolutely the fantastic news about ArcGIS Online. And so why you might be interested in a software package like ArcGIS Online is you might want to create web maps. You might want to link to all these web applications. You might have heard of things like story maps or dashboards or field maps. You might want to perform GIS analysis, and you might want to get access to loads of spatial data. It's fast, it's intuitive, it's browser-based, and that's what we're going to dive into today. So I've mentioned three things repeatedly here, and I just want to sort of define them. I've mentioned web maps, web apps or web applications, and web analysis. So these three things are what we're going to be looking at in ArcGIS Online. Web maps are these kind of buckets of a web visualization of spatial data that support applications. So these are basic online maps. They've got some custom symbology. There's limited layout options with some labeling and infographics if you want to. There's some analysis capabilities, and you're going to be doing a lot with web maps today. A little bit more advanced are web apps. These often resemble standalone web pages. These are, a little bit more customization. They're graphically appealing. You can include widgets and other interactive features. They're kind of a launching point to create things like story maps or dashboards or smartphone apps. And then the third category are these web analytics that are increasingly being available to us in the cloud. And this is where we want to quantify spatial relationships within the data. So raster data and vector data, and you might want to do spatial analysis and display the results. So if I show you some examples of these things, web maps are, as I said, simple web websites that show spatial data with some limited symbolization and labeling and a little bit of interaction. That's kind of the base that we're going to use to develop the more complex web applications that often resemble standalone web pages. I've got a few examples here from our Farm to School project that some of you might be aware of. So these are a couple of story maps or dashboards. And I'm also showing here a little snapshot of an iPhone field map that I'm obsessed with, where I track everywhere I walk in Berkeley. All of those things started as humble spatial data put into a web map and then customized into a web app. And then on the right, even a year ago, maybe a few years ago, there was limited analytical capability in something like ArcGIS Online. But as you're going to see, as you play around a little bit, there's so much more we can do. I've just taken a couple of snapshots of some of the vector analysis and the raster analysis capabilities that are available in the cloud without downloading any complicated software. It's really going to be a game changer. Okay, so one of the reasons why ArcGIS Online is becoming such a great go-to for any kind of mapping is it has a very tight integration and workflow. It's pretty seamless. And Esri calls this the data design develop workflow. And on the data side, because we're working in the cloud, we have access to so much spatial data. The main places that Esri wants to point you to are called Living Atlas, and we'll touch on this. And ArcGIS Online also has its own collection. You can also bring in your own content from your collaborators. And you can also bring in data from, say, my iPhone field tracker app. So one of the advantages is this data pipeline, multiple ways to get data into your project. The design aspect of this is all going to take place in this web map bucket that I've mentioned before. And then that web map can be pushed a number of ways to develop something a little bit more complicated. You can perform analysis in web maps, or you might want to create a story map or a dashboard or all these other things. So it's this integration and workflow that makes working in ArcGIS Online really quite nice. It's great, but it doesn't do everything. Some things that are better, maybe in ArcGIS Pro, the desktop version, is, if you really want to be precise about your cartography and design, those can be better done in ArcGIS Pro. If you want to do a lot with projection control and reprojecting data sets, that's probably better in ArcGIS Pro. And some advanced analysis is better in ArcGIS Pro, but this really is changing. And I just checked this out last week. There's new image processing stuff in ArcGIS Online. There's some really great spatial modeling stuff that just got launched. We used to have to do this, like finding your way through the landscape with a pretty complicated ArcGIS Pro workflow, but it's all there in ArcGIS Online now. And you can't really analyze things like LiDAR data yet, but you still sure can do a ton with just regular digital elevation models. So very exciting. So a few things to think about when you are working in the cloud as opposed to working on the desktop. And as I said, you can go back and forth, but there are some considerations. One of them is, and you don't have to get memorize this or get bogged down, but the gist is when you're working on your desktop, there are local data formats. These are traditional GIS formats. You might have heard of these: the geodatabase, the shapefile, the grid. They're sort of, physical chunks of data that have proprietary or open formats, but they're the sort of things that you used to, copy onto a thumb drive and share with somebody or zip up an email to somebody. But when you're working in the cloud formats are much more cloud native, and you'll often hear talk or you'll hear references to, instead of say, oh, it's my shapefile, you'll hear it's a layer and a service. And all that is the layer is just the data, and the service is how it can be used. So just be aware that under the hood, when you're working in the cloud, you want to be thinking about, am I looking for a local data source or am I looking for a cloud native data source? And when you are looking for data in ArcGIS Online, you're going to see when you look for, when you search for data, this is just a snapshot from the old map viewer. As I said before, Esri really is going to push you to two sources: Living Atlas and ArcGIS Online. Living Atlas is the Esri curated, gorgeously validated set of really amazing data sets. That's your first look. You want to go to Living Atlas and see what's there. ArcGIS Online is another massive portal, but this is where people like you or me have pushed our data up. So it's not as validated or verified, but it can still be really useful. And then there's also your content. You might have content on that you have created in your organization. And so that's what we're going to be working with a lot today with Sean is, our IGIS team has a lot of data that we've collected and we've curated. And so that's one of the advantages of ArcGIS Online, lots of access to data. Another thing that's different from desktop is how this data can be shared. When you're working on the desktop, you were just working with your data set. And if you shared it, you walked it down the hall or you emailed it. But here you want to put that control on, and you can put that control on in various ways. You can say, I want this data set to be available to me only. I want this to be available to a group that I've set up. I want this data to be available to my entire organization, or I want to make this data public. And we're letting you know this. So just understand that when you're working with data in the cloud, somebody has already set these permissions. And so sometimes data sets appear and then disappear, and sometimes you found it and then you can't. It's all because of this data sharing. All right, a couple more slides here. This is just a generic workflow example of how you can work in this data design develop workflow. You can start with finding your data, and you can find it from Living Atlas or ArcGIS Online, or maybe you push up data from ArcGIS Pro. You're going to pull it into a web map, and there's two ways. I have this web map above and web map below, because there's something called a web map viewer and there's something called a web map viewer classic. There's both ways to do this. Esri does this a lot. They have parallel tracks for doing the same thing. And then slowly one of those tracks disappears. But right now we're in the place where we have both of those options. And depending on which of these options you use, and Sean's going to walk you through this, you're going to do some development in a different app to push out a web app of your own. So it's a pretty straightforward workflow. Some considerations you should think about when you're creating these things. You want to think about who are your users, who's your audience, what's the objective of this final product, what needs to be symbolized, and how can you, keep your map simple? How is it going to be symbolized with color or shape or size? What to include and what, importantly, to leave out? And then also, are there ethical considerations to the map? Is this your data to share? How might this data be interpreted? So all of these things you should be thinking about as you design these. And then there's also some logistical considerations for web maps. You want to think about, do I want this to be dynamic, or can I make it static? What kind of data do I need, and where is it going to be served from? Is this going to be part of an existing website? Am I going to take this thing and embed it in something else? Do I need to support multiple platforms, tablets, smartphones? Esri makes this really easy. You'll be able to visualize what your thing looks like on all these different formats. Do you need to support offline access? So, if I'm creating a field map, for example, might I be in an area that doesn't have internet? Do I want to collect field data using this application? How much programming will be required? Or can I do all of this kind of from a point and click? And Esri's made that really, really particular. And then, of course, what are the costs of this? So with all of those, kind of that little bit of intro, little bit of background, I just want you to know this workshop that you're going to do this is going to be a great experience to have you dive into ArcGIS Online, and you can create some of these really beautiful products, data-rich products, very easily. So before I turn it over to Sean, I just also want to point out that this is the first in our fall 2024 workshops. We've got some other stuff coming up. There's a couple of drone-related workshops coming up in October. And then in November, we're doing the parallel version of this one, which is where we go back to the desktop and focus on ArcGIS Pro, that desktop software that allows you to do, sort of a even more analysis. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean.
All right, very good. As always, as a perfect introduction to what we'll be working on, getting our hands dirty with this application. But before I do this, I typically like to show you where we're going to go with our work. So if you have a vision of what you're working towards, sometimes it helps you to get there, and then cover a few housekeeping items that will help you move through the exercise. For the next nearly half hour, I'm just going to be doing a show and tell, so you don't have to follow along. With that said, though, this is also a good time to download the exercise if you haven't done so already. If I'm going to share my screen now, it's about 11:20. You should have received an email that looks something like this. It has the Zoom. You're already here, so you got that through one of the emails, but also there's the workshop exercise and the presentation that Maggie just provided just now. And if you haven't already done so, get yourself set up with an ArcGIS on license. We have had questions about whether or not outside organizations licenses will work. For example, we have a number of people from UC Berkeley here, and the answer to that is yes. You shouldn't have any trouble finding any of the data that we're providing. I've made sure that I've shared it openly, so it's not just within our own organization. It's out on ArcGIS Online. That'll make a little bit more sense once we get going. I'm going to close this now just because I don't want it having pop-ups in our YouTube video as we go through. And I mentioned the YouTube video because we are recording this, and typically it takes me a few days to render and edit and put it up, but we have a IGIS YouTube channel that you can refer to, going back to for either this workshop or a number of others. As we move from workshop to workshop, they tend to get a little bit better each time. So if it's about, say, ArcGIS Online, last time we covered the uh, the new map viewer that is the environment where you create your web maps. It's a new application from years past. There was a classic viewer that Maggie mentioned that was good, but they've innovated. They've made it better, in my opinion. But there's always a growing pain when you switch from one application to the next. Now it's much better, and we switched to that in March for the workshops, and we'll be doing that again today. Good. A couple things about how we might want to organize our content on the screen. There's only so much real estate we have on our windows. I know many of us have got to be experts at this over the course of COVID. That is online learning and working on Zoom, but still it's nice to get a little primer to that. What I've typically done is take that exercise that I mentioned was shared with you at 11:20, and I put it over to the left side of my screen, leave slightly underneath my working window, which will be my ArcGIS Online environment in my case. And then you can put the zoom maybe over to the right side of your screen. Just a suggestion. Yeah, if you have two screens or multiple screens, that's really nice, or a large screen, that will make it easier for you. Another thing that'll make this much easier for you, if you don't have one handy right now, you might want to get it at the break, is a trackball or a mouse. You really do need the the roller button and the other functionality of a mouse or a trackball as opposed to a touchpad on a laptop, or this will be very, very difficult for you to kind of keep up and go through a lot of the steps. With that said, let's kind of look at some of the functionality of ArcGIS Online. Again, this is a good time to get yourself set up. If you have any questions while I talk, you can put it in the chat. Shane Fire, Robert Johnson, they're experts on all things ArcGIS Online and GIS in general, but they also administer our licenses so they can get you all ready in a pinch if you need so. But back to ArcGIS Online. Once you log in, again, this is show and tell, you'll come to either your organizational page or your home page. I never do anything in the home page. This is just sort of a splash page, but I'm going to go across the ribbon from left to right to show you some of the options there. The first one after home is your gallery. This is kind of like the library of all of and what in Sam Hill, it's frozen and it's not letting me go to my gallery. There we go. I just had to refresh. Okay, so your gallery. Inside of here, you'll find all kinds of data that's been collected or curated by your organization. In our case, the ANR, Agriculture and Natural Resources Division of the UC. And we've compiled hundreds and hundreds of layers now, maybe thousands, still 10,000 plus layers now. It grows every day. But inside here, you'll see scenes, apps, tools, files, you name it. There's a whole bunch of different things that each person within the organization that has shared it at least at an organizational level has made accessible to you. This will make a little more sense in a second when we get down to groups and content, what I'm referring to there as far as accessibility. And also within there's all these different ways of viewing the data within web maps, not to be confused with web mapping applications. A lot of these GIS or online mapping terminologies are not something that we're born with. So if you have any questions about that, throw it in the chat or let us know somehow, and I'm happy to explain that more. I know sometimes I get all excited about this stuff because it's what we we love to do and get going quick. But if you need me to slow down on anything, just let me know. Or if you have any questions about, well, anything, terminology or otherwise, just let us know. We're here to help. But I digress. So there's going to be web maps that we're creating and then web mapping applications. Web mapping applications are a lot like a web page. They're templated maps with widgets, infographics, legends, other map elements, titles, you name it, that can be added in there that are published from the base level web maps that we're creating. So anyways, the gallery will have a whole bunch of those kinds of things in there. Moving on, I'm going to skip map because we're going to come back to that later. Scene, I'm just going to show this to you. It's not something that will be getting into today, but I just want to let you know that it's there. An example of that would be, for examples, that we have our HREC, our Hopland Research and Extension Center out in Mendocino County, where we've flown drones at and then rendered it into 3D modeled imagery, such as this, where you can see, where you can zoom in, you can scroll around and see it in, it's not truly three-dimensional, it's more like 2.5 dimensional, but it's yeah, you can see how this is a compelling sort of visualization of something. And by the way, you can take these, if they're shared appropriately, put them into an iframe or onto a web page and have this really neat functionality available, depending on the service, how it's provided. But again, we're not going to get into that too much today. You notice that when I went into the scene viewer, then it switched from having a horizontal ribbon across the top to now having this little hamburger stack across the left top corner, that just for efficiency of real estate. Now, if I click on that, then I'll get those horizontal options in a vertical stack. The next in the list, we're going to come back to map, is notebook. For any of you that are into Python programming, uh, you like Jupyter notebooks, for example, this is a really neat new well, newish. It's been around a couple years, but it's the way of an online environment allowing you to do a lot of the analytical and processing functions that were traditionally just on a desktop level. So it's creating more power in the cloud to do things. Neat thing is, if you create a new notebook, you can go with standard and administrative access, light analysis, that sort of thing. But if you need more horsepower, processing power, that is, you can go with advanced or advanced with GPU support that will allow much more complex or more processing intensive functions. Once something that's created, then you can do Python programming for some of your processing. We're not going to do that today. That would be an entire whole workshop in itself. But if you're interested, by the way, in any of these extra tools and other things that we do, and we're not limited to just ArcGIS Online, we're talking about all geospatial technology questions. IGIS has office hours on Mondays and Tuesdays in the afternoons. You can go to the UCANR-IGIS website and you can find office hours there. We'll probably you can get that in the chat somehow before the end of the workshop. And that's a good time and place to come and ask us about things like notebooks or whatever else you might want to do in the event that you do want to learn more about those functions. Going beyond notebook, go to groups next. So groups, this is particularly important if you're working in teams, say with a field map, like a mobile data collection application, that you want to create a small group of, say, experts that know how to identify a particular tree disease, for example. An example of how I've used this recently was creating a group for Mediterranean oak borer to go out in the field and collect tags for trees that was joined with a web map and for an analysis sake. So you would need to have a team of people that know what they're doing. And to do that, you could create a group, start the group. And then once you have a group that's already started, you can go to the details of that group and invite members or remove members, as the case might be, and go to your organization and add them in there. Moving on from groups to content. Content is one of the places that you spend a lot of time in ArcGIS Online. This is organized. So in my case, I have a whole bunch of folders. I'm going to start at the left over here. I have all of my content, which we're looking at. There's a variety of projects that I've worked on. In the case of this workshop, I'm working out of an IGIS training folder that has a whole bunch of different things that we've worked on in the past, including practice maps for this very workshop that I'll show you in a moment to show you where we're going. But each of these things are from each of these folders then will be visible on the side for organizational purposes. You'll see inside of this folder, there's all these things like an instant app. That's a web mapping application. There's the web map. We'll be working on this today to create an instant app later on. There's feature layers that are hosted. Hosted is where it's held at. In this case, it's hosted by us. And then the service of that hosted layer can depend on the source and limitations that are set on it. Maggie touched on that, but this is really important. Strangely, I was on the phone with Shane Fire. I like to call him our GIS guru earlier because I had a question. That's who I ask when I'm not sure about things. Well, at least oftentimes when I have to ask a question. And for some reason, our service changed slightly for some of our layers. And so I had to reload them to get them to work again for this workshop. But it's all good though. Now, what I'm going with there though is that depending on how these features are hosted, these are layers that will be in your map that might or might not be able to be analyzed or visualized in certain ways. That'll make a little more sense once we get going as well. And then you see shape files and any number of different things, including CSV files. Yes, you can load tabular data in here, and we'll do that in the exercise, as well as a bunch of other things. If, for example, oops, I just clicked on that. I meant to click a little bit to the right of there. Once you go in, you can see that you have a bunch of options for usage, settings. You can see how much this particular web map has been used. Like it's been viewed 28 times, which is not a lot. And settings for being able to view it offline. This is important for like field maps, that kind of thing. And then other options for sharing and editing. If I go back, something that I like to do sometimes, in this case, I should do it, add this to the favorites, because then if I go across my content and decide I have certain things that I really like a lot and I come back to, like the Calistoga Mediterranean Oak Borer project or the this particular map for future reference, I can always go up to my favorites. And then there's other options for groups that we already looked at before. It's just in a different location, my organization, which we'll get to in a second. And then Living Atlas, which I'll just mention is a repository of tons of different types of data. For in the past, like long ago, when I started doing GIS, dang near, I guess 20-ish years ago now, finding data was incredibly difficult. And now there's hundreds of thousands of layers at your fingertips. And one of the largest curations of spatial data is in Living Atlas, as well as just ArcGIS Online in general. We'll be loading data in from those sources here in a short while. Across the top again, going to organization. Inside organization, you'll see something called the credits. You can see there's a lot of credits here. I'm an administrator, so your screen will look a little bit different than ours. The functions within ArcGIS, they take credits to for various types of analysis. We have a limit on those for most members within our organization. I think it's like 10,000, which by the way goes a very long way. And if you need more credits, please just email us. As you can see, we got plenty of credits for all normal things, but those can be used up really quick. We once had an advisor try to geocode all of the addresses in LA County, I think twice, and used up almost all our credits. That's why we have a limit now. But there's, for most practical reasons, you don't have to worry about credit limits within for us. You can see members of the organization and then licenses. And this might matter to some of you if you end up being an administrator in your organization, how to manage your licenses. That we have a whole bunch of them, including really neat things like for me, drone to map standard. That's a That's free with a lot of organizational accounts right now. That's a drone image processing software. And then finally, like some of the settings, but we're not going to worry about that too much. Before we go back to map, which is the last thing that I want to show you before we take a break here pretty shortly, is this little cluster of dots at the top right-hand corner of the screen. One thing that makes Esri Products, parent company of ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online, all these different various applications, is that they're all integrated with ArcGIS Online at this point. Well, I can't think of any that aren't integrated at least. And so ArcGIS Online functions as like a hub for all these other apps, including story map builders, the map viewer that we'll be looking at today, field map, which is a mobile data collection application, experience builder, which we will also touch on today. And then all these other various apps. You can look into those if you're interested at a later time. One thing that's nice though that I do sometimes is I will bring up a second ArcGIS Inline environment just to have it off to the side, because sometimes I don't want to get out of my map and come and look at my layers and then go back to my map and maybe have an edit lost or something. So you can actually have two different parts of your ArcGIS Online open at the same time by clicking on that little cluster dot at the top. You don't have to do, again, this is just show and tell, but just something that I've taken the practice of doing sometimes. With that said, let's go back to map. So one thing that I've done for all of you is that I have, in the exercise, because this has come up in the past, I have actually created a example map that's available and with directions on how to open it if need be. This is on the bottom of page 19, top of page 20, just in case you lose your work anytime through the workshop. Just know that that's there. The way that that could be done is you would just go in, save, open, or so the little button. I'm bringing this up, by the way, because a lot of the functionality of the map viewer is not going to be visible unless I have some data in here. So I might as well bring up where we're going with our work today. I'm going to open a map. You can use that search option that I have on the bottom of 19, top of 20 to find this, but I'm going to just refer to the map that I was working on earlier. So I'm going to open up this. So here we have the map viewer you can see across the top. There's also a Map Viewer Classic. The Map Viewer Classic has a little bit different functionality. Almost everything that it can do can be done in here, but there's both a couple teeny minor exceptions, and I can show you where to find that when we look at the analysis tools in a minute. But here we have a web map that I've created. You notice there's no like title, there's no legend, anything like that on here. This is just the base map that you would use in the background of your map. Those other elements are added in your applications later on, your web mapping applications. Across the left side, we have our layers. You can add data. That's the top button. I'm going to go from the top left and down. Add buttons where you browse layers. You can add it from your files on your computer or from online. We'll be doing that in the exercise. And then the next one down is your layers. And this is where you usually are working from. You can also expand this so it opens it up and you can see what the names of these little icons are. I'll do that right now just for your sake so you can see so it's a little more intuitive. On the layers, this is something that has become a convention within Esri products in general, not just ArcGIS Online. But if you click on something on the left, the functionality or the options for that then become available on the right side of your screen. In this case, I click on it and it brings up the properties. It has information about what the symbol is, so you can edit the style of the layer as long as your service. the service for the hosted feature is set properly. You can make adjustments over here. You can look at your style. You can change what the symbols look like. We'll be doing that in a little bit. You can filter so you don't have an enormous amount of data that you don't need in some cases. We'll be working on that. Effects and other things down here. And then I want to touch on the analysis options, which is really neat. Now, there's so many analysis options within ArcGIS Online. It's just crazy. Hard to imagine just a year or two ago. The home options, it just gives you some very, like, gives you a vertical rendition of what you see across horizontally across the top. To start with, if you click on the tools, which really should be called is more vector tools or vector oriented tools, you see all these different options with there's summarizing data options. You have find locations, enrich data. That's taking, we'll look at that a little bit because it's just a neat thing that's possible. You can analyze patterns, use proximity. There's just a ton of these over here. I'm not going to show you all of them right now, but just so you're aware they're there. But this is where it gets really interesting, is that you can now do raster functions as well. So, and this depends on your licensing settings, by the way. And if you need these kinds of functions, then and you're within an organization, you might just need to connect with your organization administrator. In our case, that's Shane Fire, and can upgrade your privileges. But you can see NDVI, weighted overlays, wind chill, all kinds of things. Here's another thing that's relatively new that is incredibly cool is that sometimes you need to string these various functions together to create a model for an output. And for example, you might put together like a heat index combined with an elevation layer or something else, a moisture layer, combine those together to create like a fire risk function. And this is now possible in here where you have the third option or fourth option over is create raster function templates. And this is more or less like a model builder where you can come in and you can take your functions and add those into a template and then be able to continue with building a model in that environment. This is so new, I haven't even used it. I was trying to find the some of the various things that were different, and this is a neat option here. Anyways, I'm going to shut that out. Oops, I don't need to save it. So that's a new tool. And then there's also history, which is really nice that you can go through and find. So just know there's tons of tools over here that's down here on these options that we'll get into some of them today just to give you a little primer to it, but that could be just days of learning to go through much of that stuff. Good. Finally, when we have our map, once we've created something very much what we're looking at here, well, is part of that process. And this is where my presentation will deviate as we get going here in the next hour from the directions. Is in the directions, for the sake of organization, I put most of this, how to symbolize your map, all in one section. But for efficiency and to saving time, I am going to take those symbology changes out and include them as soon as we put layers into our map to create this. And then after that, something else is going to slightly deviate from, well, it will deviate from the directions that are provided in the exercise download, is that I'll show you how to create your web mapping applications in using, oops, I got to get a little bit more down. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. I need to be able to share this by creating an app. We'll be creating apps in Instant Apps and in Experience Builder, just to give you a taste. The nice thing is within both of those two environments, especially Experience Builder, well, both of them, there's little tutorials that are available for each of the different kind of templated formats that you create your web mapping applications. It'll make more sense as we're moving forward. Good. Let's see. Oh, that's pretty good timing. 1:55. This is a good time to take a breather and to get ready for the actually going through the workshop exercise hands-on if that's what you choose to do. Some people like to just read through the directions and just listen to me passively in the background. Some people like to try to set up their screen so they can watch what I'm doing and then do the same thing on your own computer. And then some people just like to listen and watch and then come back to the YouTube video in a week or so when they need it and do it that way. The nice thing about going through the workshop at the same pace as what we're doing is if you run into a hurdle or have a question, you can ask right then and there, and then we're all here to help. I know from past experience personally, sometimes the one button that you need is like one click away and you don't know it for a whole half hour or an hour while you're searching for it. And then finally finding you're like, oh gosh, that could have just been a simple question. That's one of the reasons what we're here for. Good. So with that said, let's take a 10-minute break and come back, or an almost 10-minute break, and come back at uh, 5 after 2, so 2:05. And I'm going to check on the chat to see if there's any questions that need to be answered. And if you need help getting your ArcGIS online set up or get logged in, that would be the time that now would be the time to do it. And to do so, you'll just go to ArcGIS online login, click on that. You should have the credentials that hopefully you're set up with, and then sign in, and then go through the steps to get set up. And we'll get going from there at 2:05. Thanks. All right, we'll get going again. So there was a little bit of questions about someone not having access to notebooks, which is typical. Shane answered the question with that. Whenever you run into something like that, ask your license administrator to give you the correct permissions. Sometimes that may be more difficult depending on the organization you're in. Say if you're at having a campus administrator, they might have different rules than what we have in ANR, but and different licensing setups. But yes, just that's your route there. Good. So for those of you that are going to be following along through the exercise, you'd want to do, I'll say it again, go to your ArcGIS Online login. It should look something like that. If you click sign in, it'll bring you to a page. This is where you enter your credentials. And when you're done with that, oops, you should get to something that looks like this. Oh, that's not one. Leave. Then you should get to your home page. This is for UCANR. If you're with Berkeley, it'll look different, and it might also open up to your organizational tab. We're going to dive straight into building a map. Sometimes you'll start a workshop in the content section because, and just this will just be for show. This is not, you don't have to take this step. I'm going to click on content now. And in here, this is where you can create new items like new features and so forth. This is pertinent, especially with field map workshops, story map workshops, those kinds of things. But for now, we're going to just click on map. Map, click the map tab, and this will get us into the map viewer. To begin with, we're going to start off slow. Just going through the basic steps of how to load data in. Mentioned before in the past, finding data used to be the biggest difficulty in a lot of GIS projects. Now it's relatively easy, but I want to show you different ways and different types of data that you can load in. If you look at the directions, you'll see a lot of information only. So I have information that is added in there. This is for your reference at a later time. I'll be going over a lot of this from memory, but because we've tried to pack in a several-hour workshop into about 2.5 hours of hands-on content, then I will leave a number of these things out, and I'll include a couple little kind of pro tips that might not be in here as well. But with that said, I wanted to make sure that you had all of this information available to you. And for that reason, you'll see through here where optional will be listed in red. I've highlighted things in red on the directions just to kind of key into those, particularly if you're like me and like to copy and paste instead of typing really fast with getting file names in and that sort of thing. That's That's key. I'll let you know when you might want to be doing what I'm doing or when it's just going to be information though. But you'll see like again, for example, here we got information only, and then we have Reddit areas to key in. To start with, we are going to just open a map like we just did. So we go to the map viewer and we'll start loading in data. We're going to be working with fire data, specifically from the Caldor fire, and I'll tell you a little story about that in a moment of how this workshop came to be, at least using the content that we have here. And we'll begin in taking data from ArcGIS Online. So you can either copy and paste and or just type, but I'm just going to copy it just for now. Control C, Control V are my friends. I'm going to go into the map and I'm going to click Add Data. So add at the top and then browse layers. So this is what you might want to be doing now if you want to follow along. So when you're in the map viewer, top left-hand corner, there's a little plus sign. Click Add, Browse Layers, and right off the bat, it's going to bring you to My Content. We don't want to use My Content or your content at this time, especially if you don't have any yet. So we're going to click the drop down and go down to ArcGIS Online. They've got hundreds of thousands or at least tens of thousands of files available there. The next thing is you have this little search. Everything's searchable. I'm going to just Control V to put in Caldor Fire. You can do so yourself. This is a lovely thing that I just noticed today, which they fixed. It was one of my big gripes last spring when I was working with this is now if you click on this little equalizer bar there and sort by, it defaults to relevance now. It used to default to date modified, and each of these might be better or worse for you depending on what you want. But if it goes to date modified, what you're looking for might not show up right away. It'll use Caldor Fire, but it'll give you all these other options before you ever get to the layer that you want. If you click by relevance, it'll put the most popular and most authoritative layers at the top. In this case, we are going to be wanting to use the damage inspection network service data that is collected for the fires through CAL FIRE and other organizations that are associated with them. And we'll be adding this to our map. To find out a little bit more about this, though, we can click on it without clicking the add button. Just click on the Caldor 2001 DINS public view, and it'll give you a summary of the data, where it comes from, a little bit where the owner of it was CAL FIRE. So you can assume that it's a relatively authoritative layer. And this is important sometimes if you need to be able to refer to your data publications or whatever, if you're publishing it online, but just have this information available. If it's online and openly available here, it's assumed that it's free to share with anybody via your website or otherwise, but just know that this is essentially the metadata. So the data information about the data that's available. You can add it to the map at the bottom here, or you can just click the add button on next right below it, and I'll just click either one of those, and you'll see a set of structures pop up, which in a moment you'll see are all within the burn scar of the Caldor fire. You can use that roller ball that I mentioned before that's really handy, as opposed to a trackpad or like a touchpad that will show you can get squared in on the data that comes in on the screen. You'll see symbology information that pops up across the right-hand side, as well as all the different various tools that you can use to manipulate the data. Fortunately, the way that this comes in, it's fairly intuitive right off the bat. It was saved appropriately. So it's with its nice symbol style already. So I don't feel the urge to have to change that. Some layers when they come in, you will want to adjust that. We'll see that in a few moments. So this would be the first layer that comes in. We're also shortly we're going to start filtering because a lot of these are not damaged structures. They're just you can see the black structures, they're not damaged, so they might not be of It might not be of interest for whatever theme that you're trying to produce. By the way, a lot of the steps that we'll be covering here are not they wouldn't be just used for fire type data. They could be used for all kinds of other purposes, whether it's say you have a 4-H club and you want to know where your clients are at, for example. You can use the same steps that we're going to be working through on this for that type of intentions as well. So again, your imagination is can, depending on where your area of interest is at, can kind of inform how you might use some of these same techniques. They are transferable in a lot of ways. And showing these different, in this case, fire data, just as an example of how to discover data online. Good. With that said, I'm going to go down the list. Other than the DINS data, the Caldor fire burn severity for team. This is a layer of burn information that shows soil burn specifically. That's for this given fire, and this will show the scar area of the fire. So what I'll do is I'll go over to add again, browse layers, closes it out. We can, in fact, if we look down, it's already the second most sought after option. So we don't even have to search for it. It's already there. We can click on that again to see a little bit of information about it. NRCS is, by the way, the National Resource Conservation Service of the USGS. So again, another authoritative source. And we can add that in as well. This will take a moment. It's a little bit bigger of a file. Oh, and it does lead, actually, I just remembered, it leads to something else that's very important on your visualization. A lot of layers, they will not appear if the range of visibility is not set properly. So if you add it in that layer, you won't see it appear on your map. We can do that though. And how that works is we'll go over to, if it's not already visible, let's see the Caldor fire burn severity on the top right-hand side. If that's not already visible, you can click on layers on underneath add, and you'll see it's grayed out here. You can click on that to make that pane appear on the right side. Click it once, click it twice until it appears. So symbology. Now, if we scroll down using the roller, you'll see there's a visibility range option here. And this point here is the scale that we're at right now. This little triangle, you can see that on yours. The current map scale shows that we're scaled out to this range. We're just right side out of the visible range. If I roll in a little bit, just a little bit more, then it'll appear. And with these weird patterns in there, which I'll show you how to get rid of that in a moment. But the easier way is to just take that visibility range and scoot it over. So now it appears. But here's the thing is it's on top. So like in other ArcGIS applications, whatever's on top on this side, on the left side, is going to take priority. It's going to be the top of the map, visibility wise. So what we might want to do is take those points and with the little cluster of dots and drag it over the top so you can see what's below it more appropriately. Now you can see there we have all these various, the dark spots is overlaying the burned area. And you can see how it coincides too with the highest burn severity being where the most damaged structures are. So if I click on the DINS, and you can see the destroyed structures are in the hottest areas, of course. So with that, this is where I kind of hop off script slightly. So this is fine. We'll leave it in here the way it is right now. And we can close out the properties on the side so it shuts down. This is where we can go back to the left and start looking at the various options that you have here. One of which, we're going to skip tables right now because there's nothing in here that's really, we're not going to be dealing with tables yet. But the next option down is your base map. And you have a bunch of options that are available here. For now, you can see that we have this basic, I think it's USGS or no, the National Geographic base map is probably what we're looking at right there, this topographic one. But we might be interested in something like hybrid imagery, like you saw on the example map that I put in earlier. Now you have something that's very Google Earth-esque, where you can see where not only do you have the satellite imagery from a variety of sources, but you also have overlaid basic features like road lines, like Highway 50 and Placer and Pollock Pines and so forth here. This might be very useful if you publish something like this for people's consumption, and specifically if you want it so they can zoom in on the web map at a later time. So I'm going to leave it with this base map for right now. And I'm going to go back to my layers, and I'm going to visit layers is where you spend a lot of time. I'm going to click on the Caldor final burn severity layer and scroll down again and make the visibility range. So if you bringing it up from the bottom, so you can get up a little bit, like say street level or so. Because imagine you want to be able to zoom in on this and not have it blocking out your view when you get to a certain level where you can see what is below it. If you follow me. This pertains to a map that I made, and which is as good as any time to explain how this came to be. So as it so happens, I own property right around, let's see, where's the old schoolhouse road? There you go. So I own property back in this area. It doesn't have any structure on it, but my dad's right on the corner of that, right at the edge, literally at the edge of the burn. Came within 500 feet of his house one side, 800 feet of his house on the other side, and something in between that on another side, because this burn edge is just where the fire line went up to, but there's always fire spots that jump over. So what happened is that I happened to be there when the fire started over here, about 4 miles away, and this weird hatch pattern, it always throws me off. I don't know why it does that sometimes. The fire started right about here in Pai Pai Valley. We knew it was getting started, so I went, packed up a lot of my dad's stuff and was ready to leave, was staying there with the trucks packed up. And in the middle of the night, my brother came running and said, "Hey, the property's on fire, time to go." So jumped in the trucks, drove back to my house in Davis, and I did not know if his house burned down uh, for days, a couple days at least, because the fire was looked like it was going to take the house. It didn't in the long run, which was fantastic, but it was touch and go. The thing though is I went online and I could not find any good, fast, like almost real-time data. Fortunately, I was able to find a back. I don't know how I found it, but I found access to an FTP of the Cal Fire that had their daily updated data, and I started throwing it onto a web map like this, published it, something just like this with minus the DINs because they hadn't done the damage inspection yet, published it, and then there was about 94,000 people that had looked at it in about 3 weeks. So very impactful and very useful. But it was not an enormous amount of effort that had to go into it. But some of the things I learned about it was how to zoom in and set the threshold so people could look to see if their house was underneath the burn patch. And of course, when you do something like this, you need to put a disclaimer on there to say that this is not your data and that it's not a certain that, say, a house burned if it's under a burned area, but it is a good reference. So that's a little of the backstory. And I will get back to the exercise directions now. So having already got familiar with this type of data and how it could be practically used in a pinch and with a lot of interest, I threw this together and wanted to use it again for a workshop, just like this, what we have here. But let's move on to some other types of data that we can add in there that are of interest. For example, we can go to Living Atlas, and you can add layers from a lot of sources besides Living Atlas, by the way. You can add in shape files from your computer. You can put in CSV files, something like you would open in Excel. A GPX is a Garmin's former proprietary format, GeoJSON, other various GIS formats can be loaded in here. Just as a little caveat, shape files, though, they must be zipped together into one single file because a shape file is actually a combination of files, all with the same name, but with different extensions that all function together. So they have to be zipped together when you add in. But before we do that, let's go to Living Atlas for online resource data. And with that, how we go is we'll go up to Add Data again and Browse Layers. Go down to My Content to Living Atlas and click on this. What we can do is we can search for some of these key terms. This is on page 15. I'm just going to copy that first name there. You can type it in if you want. Control C, wildlife risk to communities. And I'm just going to search for that here in Living Atlas, Control V. And it'll pop right up. There's another one of those. This comes from the U.S. Forest Service. You can click on it for information, but I'm going to skip that right now and just click Add. This is a large layer, by the way. It doesn't have the limits like the fires, the burn scar does. But so it covers everything up. And if you remember, you can avoid that by going to your layers again. So below Add, go to Layers, and then just drag that top layer down to the bottom. So here's what's really interesting, and I mean, from a scientific perspective, this is neat. I don't. It's not like necessarily neat that houses burn down for sure, but it's from a scientific perspective, it's interesting and neat to me to see how the prediction of risk of fire, how it coincided with the actual burned area. And there's a lot of factors that can change this, like wind direction. That's what saved my dad's house, was the wind shifted just at the right time to push the fire back on itself. The firefighter efforts, all these different things that show what did and didn't burn with the same, with the say with uncontrolled severity. But you can see that if we zoom in particularly, that now that model performed pretty well. It's not exactly what it where the highest burn severity was, but it works pretty well. This model, by the way, has been updated probably recently. If I went to the information about it, there's going to, if I would have like searched information, it's been, I think it was updated in 2023, which was after the fire. So that has shifted where the likelihood of severity could be again, but still. One thing that you can do now is you can turn off that bottom layer just because it's going to overwhelm your map. We don't really need it. I just want to show you how I add in the various layers. This is a very typical kind of workflow for a web map. You throw in different layers and you decide what you like and then remove the things that you don't like. Or you can turn them off, like blinking the eye that you can see where I'm doing on here, closing it so it doesn't show up. Other interesting things here we have. So we have wildfire risk. This is something we can add in there. We don't need to add that one since we already did a kind of a similar one. So we can search for USA current wildfires. Control C. I'm going to search for that in Living Atlas again. So add, browse. You get used to this process. Not my contact. You got to go down to Living Atlas. Current wildfires and add that in there. And then if you zoom out, you can see some of the wildfires. They're scaled based upon how big they are. You can see if you zoom in, they have thresholds that show how large the fire area is. I actually looked for the park fire data set earlier today just for curiosity's sake, and it wasn't available. I don't know where it's at. So this is not, the data sets that I'll be showing you here shortly are not universally available. There's depending on who's organizing the data via CAL FIRE. That's just as an aside. But that is now included in our layers. we'll click on layers again, and we can turn off the current California wildfires. Let's look at one more option that's kind of neat or interesting is the air quality. So we can look at air quality. This can be used for other projects as well. So we can just search for air quality or copy and paste. In Living Atlas one more time, add. And if, by the way, if this is too quick, don't worry if you're not getting any of these layers in here. We're going to remove them anyways for our final draft. But it's the redundancy and knowing what layers are available to you is it's something that's I don't know, worth learning and getting used to. So I just added browse layers, ArcGIS Online. Oops, I did ArcGIS Online. I wanted Living Atlas. And Control V. I bring this one up though for a purpose. I always usually add this one in here. I'll add you can click on it. I think it comes from the Air Resource Board or yeah, so I don't remember, Office of Air Quality and Planning. But if I add this in here, there's various locations that are around. Oh, that's interesting. Some of them are not recording information right now. They're by parts per million, 40, 35, that's great. Sometimes if you're around a fire though, I remember some of these over here, this Placerville one got up to something like 1,300. That's like you can't see just a block or two. So it's yeah, really that's really horrible air quality. I bring this up here because you sometimes want to get a snapshot of what that value is at a given time. If I remember right, these air quality measurements get updated about 4 times a day. But what if you want to know what air quality was on a given date 3 weeks from now, rather than what the data looks like in 3 weeks? And the way to do that is using an analysis tool on that data. So now that layer is included in my layer stat on my layers of my map. If I click on that and have the properties come up on the side, I can go down to analysis and use one of the tools, specifically the join features. If you want to join it with another layer, we don't have another raster that's in here that's underneath. I can bring one in a second and show you. You could join it with something like a counties layer, or you can use an enrichment tool. Let's see, where's the enrich data? So you can enrich that given layer. So you can select your input layer, the air quality one, and then add some variable that you might want. It could be almost anything. Uh, Population, whatever you want, housing, number of different variety of options here. But if you select one of these and enrich it with, say, household income, it will, this is just data that's in the background of your ArcGIS Online session. It can absorb that data into those points, and then it'll be static. It'll stop being dynamic. It'll be saved to your own files. Another way I like to do it is join it with another layer, but we don't have a layer to join here. This is one I skip because we don't usually need it, but we can add it in anyways. We'll go USA Census Counties. You can type this into your add features. This is an ArcGIS Online. So we'll add one more layer in, and then we're going to clean up our map a little bit. Add in browse layers. Instead of my content, use the ArcGIS Online. And then type in or paste census counties. And there's US Census Counties. And you can add that in. You'll see that it covers up everything. But if we now use the join mat function within the tools, you can join the target layer to the counties layer, and then those points will have just the county information and then whatever the value, the say 41 parts per million in that map. While I have this layer in here, I'm going to keep it because there's actually a cartographic technique that I kind of like to use sometimes that will make our map data pop. Something is kind of a convention of, I mean, general practices for cartography or computer cartography is to take whatever the feature is that you want to be most important, make that pop out the most. And because we don't have to have all this background imagery really that like all the surrounding area be as important, we want to have the fire area pop out. And the way we can do that is if that we're going to get into style and symbolization. We're going to click on the USA counties, get the properties up so it'll be on the side. And we'll just go to properties on the top right. So with this highlighted on the left, so we click on US counties, we have all these options across the side, but one of the first things down is to edit the layer style. That could also be done from the style button on the right. Click on style options, and what you'll see is this blue kind of color outline. We don't necessarily need that. What we can do is we can click on that and you'll get some style editing options that pop up. Specifically, what we can do is change this to say black. So it's a black background. And there's a fill transparency level that's not quite as non to zero as I would think it would be, but we can adjust that. So we can dial it back to somewhere like halfway and it'll shade everything in the background. Now it's shading everything because that feature is on the very top, but we can that's fine. Because what we'll do now is click done, done again, and then grab that layer and move it down somewhere a little bit lower. See how everything now just pops out? Let's get rid of let's just start removing things that we don't need before we take a quick break. The air quality, we're not going to be using that today, so we can click on those three dots next to it and just say remove. So that's all off there. It's cluttering up the map. We want to keep the DINS public view. So we'll keep that there, leave it on. The burn severity, we want to keep that. The USA counties, that's good. This risk to wildfire risk map, we don't need that. So let's remove that as well, clicking those three dots and remove. And then we can zoom into our map. Good. Something that you want to remember to do fairly often is to save your work. Because if you move out of your map right now, it should give you a prompt to save it. But if you were to leave the map and then come back, all the work that you have done so far will be gone by clicking, say, one of these other options at the top. So what we'll do is go into save and open. Click on this. It gives you a little blue dot to remind you too that it is not saved at where it's at right now. Click on that option and then save as. You'll want to give this a title. I forget what it is in the directions, but I'm going to call it AGOL map practice. I don't know. Last one was 8. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do 9. Oh, by the way, here's something that's a little tip. I do this. You'll see GIS people do this all the time. They put underscores between their words. This does not need underscores. And in fact, for a change, you really don't want to have underscores here, right here, because in some of your templated web mapping applications later, this title will carry over. So having a good title that it's intuitive, it doesn't need underscores, that's a good thing. I'm going to say, let's see, today, 09/27 2024, just so I have or I can put dashes in there as well. And that'll be my map title. Tags, that is something that you need to do. I'm going to put in AGOL and training. If you're adding in a tag that you have never entered before, you might have to push enter afterwards. So I'm going to put in training and click enter, and then it'll add that in. These help you search for your data later on. Sometimes I put in junk or trash. That way I can search for all my junk or trash files and then delete them at a later time when I do a lot of redundancy or repeating the same thing. But just, yeah, you have to have a tag there. Categories you don't need to worry about. You can put a summary like metadata in there, but we're not going to worry about that either right now. And I'm going to put this in my training folder, but you don't need to do that. Oop, that's field maps. I don't need field maps. ArcGIS training. Good. But you'll just put it in your general folder for now. And then click OK and save. It'll take a moment, but now this map is preserved. Let's do this. Let's take a short break. We're right on pace here. Let's come back at 2:45. So let's take like a 6-minute break and rest, stretch our legs a little bit. I like to take more of these smaller, frequent breaks. You can look over some of the options if you are idle and feel like it, one of which is your information option down at the bottom. It'll give you information about different shortcuts and so forth. If you're interested, also, if you click on one of these layers and, oops, one that has, see how this one doesn't have all the different options on the right because the current wildfires does not have the same kind of service as, say, the Caldor fire burn severity. Click on one of these, go down to your analysis, and at the very bottom, oh shoot, maybe it's not where I thought it was anymore. There used to be an option that it would show you what there's the options between this and the classic view, but it looks like they might have removed that. All right, disregard. But yeah, you can just explore different options that are available here if you're interested in doing so. And we'll come back in 5 minutes now. So let's get back to next steps in the exercise. Just you can see again, there's optional. I have it in there a bunch of times. What I'm doing right now is I'm streamlining a lot of the steps. I'm kind of jumping over some things or just kind of glossing over things like enriched data, join features, and so forth. The information is in the directions, but I don't want to tie up too much time with things that are not going to be in the final results because one of the things that a lot of people really like, myself included, is how to do some cartographic design stuff at the end using the various web map application tools, building tools. And so we're going to be using two of those today. And I want to make sure that there's enough time that it's not like some previous workshops where it's get down to the end, we've created a map and there's no time to actually create something nice and visual that you can share with your organization or whoever you need to share it with. I want to make sure that we allow enough time for that. Let's see where we're at. I think we're right at the tabular data. I mentioned before we would be getting to that, and now we will be. So if you go to the exercise directions, the top of page 16, you'll see a Google Drive link to download data. So go to that. You might, something just as a this this is something that leads to or goes back to past exercises. Sometimes people's default application for open up PDFs is an Adobe product that won't allow you to easily copy and paste. Uh, so if you need to, you can reopen the exercise in something like Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome, and that will allow you to copy and paste. This I'm working on directly from Google Drive, just be in case I see a typo or want to highlight something for future reference, so I can edit it on the fly. But for the rest of you, you want to be able to copy and paste certain things sometimes to be able to search for them. I can just click on it and go to this link in my case. So that's what I'll do. Go to this download link, click on it, and you'll see a table that shows up on the right hand side. This is a CSV file. It will only show 3 columns. I will download it right now and show you what it looks like. So I'm going to just click download. It'll show up in my drive, my downloads. I'm going to open it in the folder. And just for now, I'm going to open it just so you can look at it. You don't need to open this, by the way. I'm just going to open it in Excel, assuming that Excel will open. There we go. Good. So, and the reason why I opened it is just so I can show you what's there. There's an FID number, a field ID number, location in general. So what office we're talking about. These are the cooperative extension offices that are throughout all 58 uh, counties or at least they represent all 58 counties within the state, and the address of those given offices. So something that ArcGIS Online is capable of is something called geocoding, and it can identify addresses just like you would type in on Google Maps and then place dots in those positions or points on those positions. You can also use latitude and longitude or other coordinate systems, but addresses is typically a common way of doing this. This is powerful. I assume you can imagine that. Oops, I opened it twice. That was our roster. But the if you have like a list of clients or something like that that you need to know where they're at and to map them, or then this is a resource so you can do that. By the way, on the exercise directions, because sometimes you want this to be dynamic, you can also do it from Google Drive, from a sheet in Google Drive. And so we have a tutorial that's available there from Esri on how to do that. We're not doing that today, but just so you know, the process is somewhat similar. Once we've downloaded that sheet, we're going to add that into our map. So we'll go to the Add button at the top. So we're back to our map again. Click on the Add button. And this time we're going to add layer from file. So that's the third one down. So add layer from file, click on this. And then we'll select on your device. I know the ANR locations is the last thing that's option that popped up here from downloads. You might have to click on downloads and then click on this, but it remembers where the last place I was pulling data from. So it's already there at the top. And I'm going to just click on that once. I'm going to move my zoom out of the way. So at the bottom, I can click open. And it should automate, the default should be pretty good. So create a hosted feature layer and add to map. You don't want to select the second option. The hosted is very important for it to be served to your map correctly. So the first option is good and click next. Automatically, it'll probably figure this out. It's good at that. So it recognizes the FID as a display name, and then it's an integer, the location string, and the address. It recognizes the address as an address. So if it had something like latitude and longitude, it would recognize those coordinates as well. So again, you just can click next. Leaving the default location information is in one field. Yes, that's because the location was on the right. If it was like an address, like a street, state, zip code, then you could add in location from multiple fields. But that's not the case in this time. So the location information is one field, so we're good with that. And click next. This recognizes that I've loaded this in there a lot of times. So I'm going to put in like 927 just to show that it's a different uh, title from things that I've added in the past. And it's also important that you put in a tag. In this case, I'll just say AGOL again. I might actually put in trash enter just so I can find it later and delete it if I want to, because I don't need I don't know how many times I've loaded the same layer in there, but a lot. So, and then the categories that I don't have to worry about that. I can add this to my training folder. This is not pertinent to you, but it is for me. And then finally create and add to map. Hopefully did everybody follow along with that good? I'm going to check the chat real quick. Genoa pointed out something that's key. Geocoding does cost credits. It's I think it's like half a credit per point, if I remember correctly, something to that effect. I don't know. But it's a relatively small amount, but unless you try to geocode all of the addresses in, say, LA, like I mentioned earlier. But we have enough for plenty of geocoding here. Good. So now you can't see it in my window, but if you zoom out a little bit, you'll see a little red dot that's over on the map. I click on it and it shows the ANR location, address, Fairlane, Placerville. So that's the Cooperative Extension Office right there, as well as a bunch of other county business offices like the assessor's office and so forth is all in there. But that little dot is not, it's not popping out, is it? Not even a little bit. So let's do something about that. Let's change some symbology. So while, see how this is in the layers, the ANR locations is automatically because we just added it in. It already has a little blue line next to it. We're going to go over to style. So that's the second one down on the right, far right, second one down, the triangle, circle triangles. Click on that. And then you can scroll down until you can say location, a single symbol. So there's style options. So, and you'll see across the top, it says ANR location CSV and then style options. And you can see that little teeny red dot there that's available. That's not very intuitive and it's not going to help a lot. So we'll click on that dot and let's change it to something else. We'll click on the basic point and there'll be some other options that pop down. And under those basic shapes, let's select something else like government. You'll have a whole bunch of various symbols right here. I'm going to scroll down. I don't know, not too far. There'll be something you get. If you see something that you like, it can be whatever, but I'm going to keep scrolling until I see something that looks like a building. This looks like a building. I'll select that. Good. And I'll click done, but it's not very big. I need it bigger than that. Let's make it like 35 or something like that. And then click done on the far right or the bottom right hand corner. Done. And now you can see a building office. 35 might have been a little big, honestly. I could still adjust it a little bit more. It's not too critical that we do. I might dial it down a couple until it's pops out. The reason it's important in the case of this thematic map is that we're going to connect the like routes and the potential uh, clients or people that we could serve through ANR because the our offices are also homes to like CalFresh, Sarah, Farm Advisor, Timber Advisors help people do timber harvest plans. Any number of resources are at those cooperative extension offices, and so we connect those to the houses that would be maybe a target audience, and that's why that feature is going to be important on our map. Now that we've added that in and it looks good, let's look back at the directions. I gotta get to them because somehow they got hidden underneath. There we go. And we have that tabular data that's now been added on there. Again, if that was going to be a dynamic worksheet that we were going to say update every so often and you wanted those changes reflected on your map, say changing clientele, you might want to do that from Google Drive or a sheet. Good. So here's a little bit of info only on transformations and stuff that we've already worked on mostly. But what we will do is a filter. Skip part of the first part and then go to the second part. Good. So what we can see here is there's a whole bunch of houses. I mentioned before, we might not be interested in the houses that are undamaged. They're fortunate that, but the less fortunate people might be the target audience, specifically with structures or houses that are partly damaged and might be calling for resources. If it's completely gone, then there's not going to be anybody there. And if it's not damaged at all, then those folks might be okay. it's the partly damaged structures that we might be of interest. So what we'll do is we'll go over to the DINS layer, click on that on the left-hand side, and we're going to add a filter now. And that filter could be done with this little filter button, the third option down on the far right-hand side of the screen. If we click on that, we can add a filter. And here we can click new, add new. So this time, see how it reflects in there? It just automatically selects the first filter option. We could say damage is no damage. Let's select something like 1 to 9%. That's a little bit more like it. So that's only the um, so only structures that are damaged 1 to 9%. Well, this could be really any number of things. And you notice there's like 4,000 or something, 4,500 positions. We want to get it down to a relatively small amount just so it's focused on what we're interested in. If you wanted to, on the next step, add in another clause, we could say condition not damage. Let's say that the structure type is single family residence multi-story. We're just interested in those ones. There's also single family residences single story, but it's kind of a hassle to be able to go through, like you would change it from is to is not, and then you'd have to get rid of all of the rest. And that just takes too long right now. We don't want to have to deal with that. So we're just going to, for practice, we're going to say single family. So just go with the default single family multi-story and burned affected 1 to 9%. And then we can just save that. And so now you can see we just have those green structures that are popping up on the map. This is something that is key is if you do any kind of analysis right now, for example, and we're not going to do this just because we don't need to like waste time waiting for the processing to finish. So this can do, you can follow along, but don't don't apply it at the end. If we click on analysis right here and we decide to enrich this layer, we can do the DINS. We enter in. I'm going to go a little bit quicker because we're not going to finish this process anyways. But if I enter in let's see, the DINS data right here. And so input features, there's only 22. That's a reasonable amount. We can select a variable. So there's a variety of variables that can apply to this. There's housing, education, income might be of interest. They used to have topography, which was really neat. So we can have at risk, policy, crime. I'm going to just go with something like income for now. So we can click on income and show all income variables. So you can have disposable income. There's a poverty index somewhere in here. There's a variety of options. We can select any one of these. We can just select 2024 income options. We can just select any one of these if you wanted. Select again, we're not going to process. What I bring this up for though, is you can see it has all of these options. You can X out of whichever ones you don't want. Also, by the way, and if I estimate credits, it's going to take a second. Oh, credit estimate, scroll down to correct errors. I don't know which one. Oh, you have to select a couple different things. So there's a few options that you have to select. I should have probably picked a different income or different layer then for enriched. Or let's X out of that. And then I'll add a variable again, something that's a little bit more specific. Income. Oh, wow, it's gone now. I don't have a poverty index. So I'll just select the one and then see if it makes me select any line distance. It's interesting that that requires you to have some of these things. Enter output name. I'm just going to type in a random something, estimate credits, enriched variables. So this is giving me a little bit of weird errors that's not liking. So I'm going to skip it. But what it would give me back is something to the effect of like 11. Usually I've run poverty index and it just doesn't give me, it's quite easy, but you get the idea. And I won't make you watch me try to problem shoot this random. Oh, there's now it's estimating credits. So it said 11.22. So you can get the idea. That's how much credits it would use. In the greater scheme of 10,000, that's not too many. What would happen was it would just attach the average income to each of those houses. So then we could have a kind of an estimate of who might be in most in need. Good. So I'm going to just, I'm not going to say run. I'm just going to go back and I can X out of those tools for now. But we have the filter on there already. Uh, so key thing is there was a 22-ish credits or 11 credits or whatever it was for 22 features. Remember, the original data set was 4,500 roughly before I filtered. So if you ran the same process on 4,500, that would be about 2,500 credits that you'd use up for that process. So quite a bit more, but more, well, at least for me, more importantly, would be the long time it would take for it to actually finish running. Let's see. I already spoke about join layers. That's the same steps, more or less. That would be, I'm not going to do that. I'll just show you where that's at. Join features, as I could join, say, the DINs. Oops. Join the DINs layer with the counties layer, wherever that's at on here. If I join those two together and set it, then it would export it for with just those 22 features, it would export that to another location as well inside of my drive or inside of not my drive, but my content on ArcGIS Online. Good. Any questions? Let me check their chat real quick. Good. All right. Need to pop in there every so often. Good. Once you've done this, by the way, I highly recommend selecting save. And now that you've added in the tags, you can click save and it'll work fine. It'll take a second for it to save, and then those changes have been made. Just a little suggestion, what you can do, especially since we've filtered this now, what I might do is click those three dots and then say duplicate. And so now it creates a copy of that on here. It's above. If I click on that copy and go over to the right-hand side and click on filter, it'll still have all the filter information that was included with the other one. I can clear all of those and have all of the features. The value of that is then you can toggle on and off to see how it is relative to the other positions on the map. I can just keep that blinded or turned off, or I can remove that right now also. I'll leave it on. I might remove the current US wildfires though. I like to kind of try to keep my table of contents or my layer of contents kind of tidy because it can grow out of control at times. Just a side note, if you have too many layers in your map, it will eventually jam up your map. It won't. I forget how many it was, but I ran into that when I had just perimeter of daily fires. As the fire progressed, I kept a perimeter line for each one. Speaking of that perimeter line, let's add the perimeter in now. Oh, one more step before we do. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Good. I'm going to show you how to do a calculate distance. So down on the top of page 19, there's a nearest ANR facility to threatened structures text. I'm going to copy that, and I'll show you why I'm going to copy that. Because I could run an analysis to create like a roadmap from each of these structures to the county office. And that's what I'll do right now. So I'm going to click on the ANR locations. I'm going to go down to analysis tools. This, by the way, is being pre-processed for you, so it's not you won't have to wait for it to finish processing. So clicking on analysis, like almost down at the bottom on the far right-hand side with this triangle and the little squigglies around it, the dots, we'll go down to use proximity. And what we're going to do is select find closest. So when I do that, I'm going to input the layer, the ANR locations, and the nearest layer would be not the copy of the DINS layers. Remember, that has all the features attached to it. Only the DINS public view one. So the original one that's filtered. That way that the proximity will only run lines to those features. If I scroll down, I can select driving time or driving distance. Driving time is fine. You don't have to specify a time for that. Match search range in minutes. You can set that, but you can also set your range to something else, would be the environmental settings, processing extent, and you can say not the full extent, just the display extent. So that you follow that. So if you go down, so under your find closest function, you have to go all the way down to the bottom, expand the environmental settings, and then select just display extent. And then what we can do is then we can just adjust our display. So all of the features in the cooperative extension office is there. That way it doesn't try to reach out and connect things from all over. It'll only show what we're looking at here. Now, when we estimate credits, what's going on with this? Estimate. I've never had it fail, and I don't see any errors on this. Drive time, max unit, max range. Oh, I did have an error. I would have to put in a name. In fact, what I would normally do is put in that name, but I've already created this, by the way. So this is the name I would put in there, and then estimate credits, and then it'll pop up. So it's only 0.5 credits. That's nothing at all to estimate the drive distance. Don't process though. Don't run, because it takes like 2 or 3 or 4 minutes to do this, depending on how many people are hitting their servers online. So instead, what we'll do is we'll just go over to add data. If we would have clicked run right there, oh, include route layers here. So we have to click that toggle on box. I almost forgot about that. So the input name, and then we have to include a route layers. And the route layer then will be included in this layer that I will show you right now. So if you click add browse layers. So from the add browse layers, not in my contact, but in ArcGIS Online, Control V. So it's the nearest ANR facilities to threatened structures, and click add. So again, that's from the very top of page 19, the text for that layer in ArcGIS Online, and I click add. And this would be what the results of this process, this find closest, would look like over there. So you see the lines that run to the cooperative extension office. Now, if I go back to layers You can see find nearest. There's a little drop down because this is actually a multi-feature option here. So there's the nearest in our facilities and then the connecting lines. We already have the facilities, so we can turn off the structures one, but the connecting lines is there. So we can see the drive lines to and from. If we wanted to, we can move this up to the top so that it actually shows up a little bit better on our map. Good. Here, we'd want to go back and save. Good. And now we have most of the features that we would want for our map all in place. Let me there's one more. The one that I almost jumped to ahead of time. We're going to put in a fire perimeter layer, this from CAL FIRE's database, and then we'll take a break and then we'll come back and play with some of the web mapping applications. So for me, this was a gold mine when I found it. This FTP site, which is again, on page 19, just slightly down. Go ahead and click on that, copy and paste it perhaps to your web browser and open it up. And what you'll see here is it won't be intuitive to you. So I'm going to move this to the center of my screen for a second. Oops. Why is it jumping around on me? Good. So what you'll see here is a bunch of dates. These were the daily updates of the perimeter of the fire as it grew. So as you can imagine, down at the very bottom is the end date. There's actually an error in the very last date, but the fire it wasn't growing anymore at that point. So we will be using the 9/16 date, but hold here because I wanted to show you something. Don't follow where I'm going because you'll have to come back to here anyways. I'm just going to show you what else is available. If I go up into the parent directories, you can see there's all these fire records similarly for other dates. If I go up even further, I can see it goes back 2023, 2022, 2021. For whatever reason, the park fire is not on there. I looked on the 24 just for curiosity's sake. But if you're doing fire studies, if that's one of your areas of interest, this is like I said, this is kind of like a gold mine of different types of data. And when you go into these files, just like I did with the 2021, I go in, you'll see Caldor going in, inside GIS, incident data, and you can see each of these different dates of the incident data information. If you're a remote sensing person, if you go outside, you can also find imagery, but I'm not going to navigate through all the directories to show you where that's at. So I actually was looking at their imagery and making slight corrections on things that I could interpret the word not quite where they were supposed to be, for example, and the scale that they were doing their mapping at. With that said, let's go down to the very bottom to this 2021 0916. Click on that, and you'll see there's two files that are in there. They're actually zipped up files, one being a geodatabase and one being a perimeter shape file that's already zipped up for you. Might not remember, but earlier I mentioned when you bring in data into ArcGIS Online as a shape file, it needs to be zipped up because it has to have all the connected files for it to work correctly. So what you can do though is just click on this and it'll download to your drive. I've already done this today, so this will be my second one. So you just click on it, it'll automatically download. You don't have to do what I'm about to do here, but I'll do it so you can just see what this entails. I'm going to go to the file folder, bring this up, and I'm going to just create another folder in here. New folder. Just so I can show you what's inside of that. You don't need to do this. Once you download that, just where it's sitting is fine. But just for information only, I'm going to put it in another file folder because I will extract it. You don't need to extract it. I'm just extracting it so you can show you what's in it. And here we have all these connected files that I was speaking of. There's the projection file, the index file, the actual shape file, the database file. It's usually somewhat, yeah, DBF. So you need to have those files, those four for ArcGIS Online to be able to interpret. The SBN you don't need, the CBG file you don't need, but it's all packaged up. And if you do have those in there, it doesn't ArcGIS Online knows how to interpret it. But I just wanted to show you that this is how you'd have a collection of files. They need to be zipped up though to be ingested into your ArcGIS Online, which is what we're going to do right now. So back at your map here, I'm going to click on, so we'll navigate back to the map, click on Add Data and Layer from File. This time you can go to your device again. So I'm going to back up one more time because I know I skipped through there pretty quick. I'm going to go to Add Data from File, and then I'm going to click on your device. In my downloads, I have this parim file folder. I also have this one that I downloaded earlier today. I'll just use that. It's the same one that you will have seen, the 0915 layer. I'll click on that once, and I'll click Open. It'll automatically recognize it as a shapefile. And then I click Next. It already recognizes that I've used this file a number of times, so I'm going to just give it another extension 927, just so it's thinks it's a different file. And then I'm going to put it in my training folder. You can just leave yours the way it is. IGS training. Tags, you do need to enter in tags. I'm going to enter in trash because I have trash folder or junk I put sometimes. And then once that the tags and the file name has been accepted, then you click Create and Add to Map at the bottom right-hand corner. Oops. It'll work for you all, but it doesn't let me add it in again since I've already put it in. That's fine. I'll just go in. I'm going to copy part of the name. It'll pop into your map. I'm going to have to add it in because it's already in my layers. Oh, here we go. Because I added it in earlier today. Good. So that's what you should look at. Something to this effect is what you should see on your map. In this, so we can use this for a little bit of cartographic effect right now. This didn't make it better, did it? But what we can do though is go and change its style real quick, and then we'll take a break. So to change its style, we'll go to layers again on the top left-hand corner. Click on the perimeter file that you just added in. And then so it's blued next to it. Go over to the little styles, circle, triangle, square on the right-hand side. And then pick a style options under single symbol down toward the bottom. You can see it's blue right here, but we'll click on that. And we'll adjust this again, something similar to what we did with the background of the counties. I'll select black. I'll make the transparency most of the way down. And outline color, black is fine. I might increase the outline width though, a couple points to say 3. So it kind of shows a true outline. 2 or 3 would be good. We don't need to be too picky. But once we've got that all done, then we can click done, and then move that Caldor outline down a couple levels, where some like halfway down, so it gets at least below probably the DIN's public view, so it pops out. That was one of the reasons of leaving it partly transparent, because it'll make those structures pop out pretty nicely on the map, I noticed. So good. So now we have all the parts of a pretty decent map here, I think, right? Let's click save one more time, and let's take a 5-ish minute break. maybe a 6-minute break. All right, let's get going. Finish this up, huh? Hopefully this is following this pretty well and it's going to be useful for you. You can see we have a pretty nice map here that we've created so far, but we're going to take it over the finish line in a couple different ways. One of the first things, though, that I should mention is we need to adjust the names of the layers because the names of these layers end up getting carried over into your final products. And if they're not intuitive and clear, it's just not good later on. The same thing applies to the title of the map, which we've already done, but if you needed to, you can click on the edit button at the top and change that. But we already put that in then just fine. But we do need to change the names of some of these layers, starting with the nearest ANR facilities to threatened structures. So we could rename that to something simple, like UC, oops, UC ANR Cooperative Extension Offices or UCANR offices. Let's make it simple. Click OK. We can click on the next one down, the ANR location CSV. What the heck is this? Oh, that's the first one. That I meant to put that as the second one. Dang it. I guess I'll rename that again. Rename. So you can see that the possible error. So what we really want to call this is the directions to those cooperative extensions offices. Oh, wow. Directions to UC ANR offices. Good. And click OK. And the next one we change to UCANR offices, rename. I know this is slightly tedious, but it will help in the long run. If you want to have your final products looking good. We've already done most of the style and symbology, so there's not too much more to go on that. So then we have the damage network report. We don't need the first one. We're not going to include that on there. In fact, let's remove that entirely. So let's remove that so it doesn't accidentally get included. We have the Caldor. That was the copy, remember, not the original. Wish it was a back button on this. But the California DINS public view layer, let's rename that to the something to the effect of damaged structures. And click OK. These don't have to be perfect, by the way. I'm just trying to clean it up so our final map in Legend looks good. So you can see on the right side now it says damaged structures, and then it's just a lot cleaner. Going down to the perimeter, we can rename that. Caldor Fire Perimeter. Or final Caldor Fire Perimeter. Click OK. And again, these don't have to be exact. And then Caldor Fire Burn Severity. So we can rename that one. Good. So now see, we have this nice, clean, elegant list of options there on the right-hand side. That, again, is going to carry over into the next step. And after we've done that, let's click Save. And we'll go down to Create App. So the down second, close to the bottom, click Create App, and we're going to go with Instant App to start with. So the first option. You have all these different options here. You can look at these later if you'd like. You can click on preview if you'd like to at some later time. But right now, we're just going to go with something basic because going through all of these different options, there's little nuances on each one you can explore. But we just want to have a basic, quick map right now, an instant app. So we're going to select the third one over, the basic, and choose that. The tags that carry over automatically are good. It'll give you usually the defaults are all fine unless you want to change the title of the map somehow, but I'm going to leave it the same for now and create app. And you can see how it pops up. There's something that's, I don't know why, it's just like a little pet peeve. Why they have this express button automatically turned on, I don't know. The express option it doesn't really help very much. If you get down and you click, don't do this, you could click get started, and it'll give you all the options that you would have if you don't have express checked. So if you uncheck express and click continue, then you'll have all those options that are in the get started functions that you're going to probably want and need anyways. So having that unchecked is good. So that way we can just start from the top and move down. Starting with map, that's the one that's already by default open. You can see the map. Don't click on the map right now, but if you scroll down, you can select details. Select map or scene. What the heck's going on here? I just did this. An X out of that. Oh, I see. That's what I was missing. There's a little toggle button down in the right-hand corner is what I was looking for, where it says map area. So see map and then go down. I missed it because it was underneath my zoom bar. But the click on the map area toggle on switch and select configure. And what this will do is allow you to set the zoom range for your map appropriately. So you want to get it in the window about where you want it and click set. That way, then that's the scale of your map when someone brings it up on the URL that you can provide. Good. So once that's set, you can set save, and that's how the map will be rendered upon opening. Next, we'll go down on the left. So we're good with this, with the map option. We'll go down to about. This is kind of key. I like this, is put in a header. A lot of maps, you want to have the header, and that's why you wanted to have that map title the way you liked it from the other map, because it carries over in this case. Sometimes you can edit these. You can edit right here, actually. If you wanted to change the name, you can change the title here on the bar, but the map name is good. You can't adjust make it centered or anything like that, but at least you can include it. This again is an instant app. Other templates will allow you to have a lot more adjustments, including the experience builder, which is what we'll touch on in a few minutes. But you can see adding the header's good. You can look down and see the various options. Open legend when app loads. That sometimes might be useful. For example, if I click on that, it might allow that to happen, or it'll jam up like it just did for me. But there it goes. It finally is starting to move. But you can turn on and off the legend options, but we don't need that on for right now. Usually the legend is automatically included over on the right-hand top corner. It's not intuitive for everybody, but it's there. And then if I scroll down, you can see just a couple other fixed pop-up locations, that kind of thing. We don't need to adjust any of these for right now, but they're okay. But we can go over to interactivity. And so you can modify some of the options on your map, explore and navigate. You can have those be able to toggle on and off so someone can navigate, zoom to certain areas, that kind of thing. You can include a compass on there, something that some people like to do. Boy, my computer's chugging along hard and taking a second to get things loaded in. Strange. You can enter in a scale bar. That's something that you like, which is not always available in some options, but you can include that in there. You can see it down in the bottom left-hand corner. And we can go back then. You can modify, toggle on your base map. I like this actually, making it more like Google Maps like, where you can change your base map from this visual range to a street map. So you can do that there. And so you can see there's a variety of options on here. Share with users. So you can set sharing options. We're not going to worry about that right now because that can be done elsewhere. And back, why is it seems, there we go. There's so much lag time on this thing right now for some reason. There we go. And then you can set search functions, but I'm not going to do that because it's taking a little bit longer than usual. The other thing is theme and layout. The theme is defaulted to white now. I know this by looking at it, but light, but you can also change it to dark. Sometimes dark is preferable. It's in this map, I could go either way with it. So I'll leave it on dark. You can change text, fonts, that kind of thing, but we'll leave it as is right now. You can switch languages. If I were to now, having said all of that, if I clicked get started, it would give me some more options that beyond what I already went through, like the position manager will allow you to go to options on where you want to have a compass, where you want them positioned on your map. So you can play with these if you wanted to. So it says top, bottom, top, right. You can grab these and pull them over into other sections if you want, but the way they are default is fine with me for now. But it does matter on depending on what kind of data that you have on your map though. And then one last thing I'll mention, the logo. You can, if you have, say, an A&R logo, you could upload that logo, or your, say, CalFresh or Syrup or whoever you're working with, UC Berkeley, you could add in those logos right there. Good. Once this is all done, though, you can see we have basically an okay map right here. If I go and select publish at the bottom hand corner and click confirm, it says they have been published, and then I select launch. You can see what the map looks like. This is now, if you set your user settings, so if you go, I can go back to that in a moment and show you how to do that. If it's the sharing settings are set appropriately, now you say you shared it with everybody except for instead of just sharing it with yourself. You could take this URL, Control C, and send it to your boss or to your mother or whoever, and they could open this up. This is like what I did is I just copied and pasted this and put it on Facebook, and that's how I got that 94,000 hits on it on when I created this similar map is this. So that's how you get that final result right there. Something neat. This is still interactive because it's tied to the layers in the background. So if I click on, say, this address, it'll bring up the house, and it'll even have sometimes pictures of the fire damage that's on the houses. If you so that's information that's available for each one of these when the inspectors came out and took that information. But again, this is public domain data. You do want to be cognizant, though, of sharing, putting up data that might not, you can use your best judgment, but data that might be private. You don't want to, yeah. There's ethics when it comes to some of these kind of data sets that you have to decide depending on how you put it up. Because remember, anyone can use this if you have it shared with everybody and anywhere, and it will become discoverable if people know what keywords to search for. But see, there you got one way of putting up a map. You can also, I mentioned over here, you can click on this stack on the top right-hand corner to show the various legend options. I could remove some things off of here to in the original map is where I can change my sharing settings, and I'll do that right now. So if I go all the way back to the original map, so see how it's still available where I was working on it before. If I click share map, this is shared right now to just me. If I set it to share with everybody and I saved it that way, that's how that web mapping application then would be available to anybody. So that has to be done at the share map level here. Is, well, it is on here. If we click on share it here as well, so this is sharing level owner, change sharing settings would bring you back to something similar to what you saw there and change it for everybody. And then it'll be shared in that way. Good. Let me check. There's no questions. So I'm going to switch over to Experience Builder and do the basic outline on that one as well. So if I go back to the original map, so it should be up in your, up on your, across your top in your map viewer, view back with the little circle of the world right there. Now let's create one more app. This one's even, it's can be more complex, but it's actually even easier in some ways. If we click on Experience Builder, so you saw what I did right there. I was in my web app. I went to create an app. And this time I clicked on Experience Builder instead of Instant App, and then it'll give you a pop-up window that looks like this. I'm going to just go with the first option is create blank full screen. This is kind of funny. I don't know why it does this. It puts the map down on the right-hand corner and you have to stretch it out to fit every time. And it's kind of awkward. But now that this is up, there's what I would do is click on it and then just start dragging the corners until they get all the way up to the corner of the screen. Same thing at the bottom, just drag until it's almost where I want. I have no idea why it does this. It's just kind of odd. Till it's about where I want it, and then we're good. You have to scroll over to the right. It's already good. All right. So once we have the map on there, we're going to want to set the custom view, the extent, just like we did on the other one. And how we do that is on the right-hand side, there's the select maps already selected. We'll go down and select custom view right underneath that on the right-hand side and click modify. And here we'll zoom in to just the map area, click OK, and that'll be the map extent. So it does it a little larger than what you see. You can modify it again, maybe go in one more click and OK. By the way, though, you might, if you get too far in, then it's, yeah, it'll cut off little teeny things on the side. So I guess I do have to go out one slight click and OK, good. So we set that the extent. There's all the tools that are optional across the right-hand side, including the compass, which direction you're looking. There's the navigation that's available, all these other options. You can have the scale bar that's included, just like we did on the other one. You can have navigation. Those are the key ones that I sometimes add in there. You can have a base map that's included in there. So some base map options, just like we did on before. And then beyond that, we also have the option of adding widgets in this map. So we just added those other things that we were interested in, but let's do a couple other things, like a measurement tool is kind of neat. Putting this over on the side, squeeze it way down. I don't know why it comes in as a huge block. There's no need for that. It just can be small. And put it down somewhere kind of toward the bottom right-hand corner of your map. And then lock it in place, lock its position in the corner so it's just not floating around. And then you can have various options that you can include there, arrange. what you want to include on the measurement tool. And this is what it is default set to, is the distance and area. I'm just going to do distance for now. And that now that widget is included on there. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment when we render the map. So we got that options down at the bottom. We can go down and select other options, one of which, if I go far enough, there's text. And I click and drag that up somewhere kind of in the center top of the map. And you'll see it's all blacked out. If I double click and drag over the text, I can start typing on there to show what I want. So I can say Caldor burn. And I need to change this though to something that's visible. So I went over the top of it. I'm going to change it to something more like 35 on the text size and make it bold so it pops out. And then I can do some other effects here. So it's kind of, I might want to make it centered. It's one thing that I often do. Also, we'll go up to style and go down to background and set some kind of background in there. You can do custom backgrounds, by the way, too. So we can change the background to something custom and browse through imagery or fill colors to get something even, I don't know, darker, different. Good. Or just go with the default too. But you can play with these different background effects. Now that it's up on here, I can change that to Caldor burn severity, Caldor fire, burn severity. And I might have to stretch this out so it doesn't get lost and adjust it appropriately. And now we have basically a lot of the same characteristics that we had on the other map. As you can tell, we got a title, we got a legend, legends included automatically. We actually have a measuring tool that's available. You can adjust some of the other options on across the left-hand side, which we won't really get into. We can add in like call outs and so forth. So there's like, you can add in more web maps, add data. There's a number of options. One thing that I'll point out though is down in the bottom left-hand corner, if you click on help or show help guide, it'll give you information about the experience builder, and a lot of the techniques that you use for one thing carry over to another. And then there's the show help guide, and it'll tour you through basic steps for this given template. The other templates all have the similar kind of options that are available to it as well. And once you've got played with a lot of these different widgets, options, background, styles, you name it, we can go and publish. First, we'd save it on the top right-hand corner. There's the save button. It says save successfully. And then you'd select, there's the option of dropping down save as too. We can save it as something else. In this type, it's titled Experience 11. We probably want to save it as something else. Save as, I don't know, Caldor Fire Experience Builder, whatever you want to put in there. I'm not going to get too technical on that. Save in folder, training. Okay. And last thing is I would select publish once it comes up. And it'll say it's publishing. It'll take a second. Published. And then click the play button, preview. This is where you might have to go in and adjust some things. Oops, I made this scale bar thing too small. But if I click on that, I can click and then measure like distances in kilometers. I have to go back there and adjust. That's why it was a little bit taller. It's just I made it too small. To adjust that though, I would just go back to the builder again, click on that option, go over to it, adjust it to where I want it, and then resave it. So I save this again, and then I go back to the app and I will refresh it, and then it'll give you then you can see what's available more in there. Good. So you can see why I demonstrated that is because if you scroll back, when you need to make changes, you have to leap back sometimes to either the experience builder that we are working in, or if you need to change symbology of the actual layers, we have to go all the way back to the original web map. Say if we wanted to remove layers or change the style or pop up all these different things that are available as options in here, which I didn't want to dive into because that would be a whole class on cartography that we'd be limited on. So now we have about 5 minutes left, or yeah, 5 minutes left. I want to make sure that I can check to see if you have any questions. If you want there's not too many of us, you are welcome to unmute and ask your questions now. One thing I might mention though, Shane Fire sent out a survey. If you would please fill that out right now, that would be great. We take our surveys very seriously. Not only does it tell us what we're doing right or what we could do better, but it also is we put in our reporting. So when I go up for say merit in a couple years, then I can say, hey, we had this many workshop attendees that thought this of our workshops. So yeah, please fill out those evaluation surveys. They mean a lot to us. And I am happy to answer any questions that you might have or comments or any of the above. What do you think? Good. Hopefully you all have a really great weekend. And thank you very much.